We did that. Hermine Allen.
How many grocery stores do you think are in the city of Santa Clarita? Well, there are 33, 15 of which are within 5 miles of Trinity. In fact, there are over 38,000 grocery stores in all of America. Upside, we have an abundance of food made easily available to us. Downside, we have more food than we can manage. In 2008, 43 billion pounds of unused food was thrown out of grocery stores and dumped into landfills. We as consumers support this model of farming when we make our consumer purchases to feed ourselves and our families. Today, an industrial model of agriculture is over our country. As Christian consumers, we ought to consider whether we should support these farming practices that contribute to the environmental crisis that we face today. In the Bible's creation account, God initiated man to be responsible stewards over the earth. What does it mean to be a steward? In the Holman Bible Dictionary, stewardship is utilizing and managing all resources God provides for the glory of God and the betterment of his creation. We can see stewardship in the Bible when God commanded man, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill and subdue the earth, and have dominion over every living thing that moves on the earth, and work and keep the land." These commands given in Genesis influence farming practices as we see them today. Sustainable farming, according to author Andrew Friedland, fulfills the need for food and fiber while enhancing the quality of soil, minimizing the use of non-renewable resources, and allowing economic viability to the farmer. Conversely, industrial farming applies the techniques of the Industrial Revolution, standardization and mechanization, to the production of food. Looking at the farming system of America today, we can see how industrialized agriculture has diminished sustainable farms. The Bible calls us to be responsible stewards of creation based on principles found in Genesis, to work and keep creation, and to subdue and have dominion over the land. These commands are best fulfilled through a sustainable farming model, as its practices serve and protect the environment and ensure better living for future generations. In contrast, industrial farming practices reject biblical principles, as its practices harm the earth and abuse the dominion we are given as stewards. As good stewards who have dominion over creation, Christians ought to support a sustainable, not industrial farming model. God created man in his image to be responsible stewards over the earth. By nature, man has an authoritative relationship over God's creation. We can see this by the dominion God gave man the role of in Genesis 1:26. While this dominion does make us superior to the earth, it does not advocate an abusive relationship of thoughtless consumption and destructiveness. Rather, with this dominion, we must work and keep creation, as God commanded Adam to do so in Genesis 2:15. The original Hebrew for these words, abad and shamar, mean to protect and to serve. This applies to us and how we must treat the earth and ensure it for better living for future generations. As heirs of Adam and Eve, we ought to obey God's original commands relating to dominion and be good stewards of the earth. As rulers of creation, we ought to consider the most practical way to pursue stewardship. Stewardship can be pursued through sustainable farming, which we can support through consumer purchases. Sustainable farming practices include multi-cropping and natural fertilization. Multi-cropping is planting multiple crop species on a given area of land. This also includes crop rotation, which is changing what is grown from season to season. This is very beneficial to soil quality as it does not exhaust the land and increases biodiversity, which helps reduce soil erosion, helps with pest control. This also involves intercropping, which is planting different crops in between rows of other crops. According to Stephen Machado, scientist and professor of dryland cropping systems, This method has proved especially beneficial in countries such as South Asia and Africa, where environmental stress is common. Intercropping fights against total crop failure. It also helps reduce insect damage, as one crop may act as a deterrent and make the other crop seem less attractive to the parasite. This is beneficial to soil quality, as it does not exhaust the land. Sustainable farming practices also rely on manure, compost, and natural fertilizers to promote biodiversity and increase productivity and obtain higher yields as a result. As industrial farming honors God's creation, it does this through its careful practices. Conversely, industrial farming practices harm the earth and abuse the dominion we are given as stewards. God designed the earth so that its treatment has inherent consequences. These consequences can be viewed through industrial farming practices. Monocropping, which is planting one crop specimen over a large area of land year after year, degrades the soil of its nutrients. As a result, huge doses of chemical and energy are required from fossil fuels and fertilizers to restore these nutrients. However, these chemicals have a negative impact not only on our land, but on society. For instance, when nitrogen fertilizers run off the soil, they contaminate our groundwater, and when consumed by the public, can cause gastric cancer, kidney and urinary infections, birth malformation, amongst many other diseases. This issue has hope of being reversed through sustainable soil practices, such as no-till methods and crop rotation. Industrial methods of tillage churn up great amounts of soil using heavy machinery. The carbon from the soil is exposed to the air and forms carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. Today, the carbon level in our atmosphere is 400 parts per million, 50 parts per million beyond what keeps the climate stable for human life. Out of all the carbon in the atmosphere, land misuse accounts for 30%. With sustainable soil practices, this issue can be reversed. In defense of industrial agriculture, Josh Ozerski, food writer and historian, argues that we live in a very big, highly industrialized nation, which can only feed its inhabitants through its commercial infrastructure. He argues that only industrial farming has the power to feed our growing population at affordable prices. Industrial farming does increase the rate of production. It does provide more food for our country. However, agriculture currently produces 4,600 calories for every man, woman, and child, twice as much as we need to thrive. Additionally, the average American already wastes 30% of food they purchase. Considering this, industrial farming has not relieved hunger, but has fed a culture of overconsumption, where huge quantities of food are thrown in the trash, while at the same time, the population is in the throes of an obesity epidemic. Sustainable farming may decrease the rate of food production, but not at the cost of our hunger. The food production system of America today uses 10% of our total energy budget, 50% of land, and 80% of all fresh water consumed. Yet, 6 billion pounds of fresh produce is left to rot in the fields every year. In a country where so much is wasted, we do not face a problem of deficiency, but of overconsumption. Consuming products of industrial agriculture opposes the role of stewards we are given by God on this earth. While convenience may be appealing to our advancing society, the costs outweigh the benefits when it comes to industrial farming. We can easily nod our heads and agree that, yes, sustainability is the best for our earth. However, Affirmation is not enough to create change. I challenge you all to evaluate your own consumption and purchasing habits. Where does your food come from? As Christian consumers, it is important to know the answer to this question in order to effectively steward God's creation. Whether it be grocery stores, farmers market, or your own backyard, there are countless ways to support sustainability and be stewards of God's creation. I implore each and every single one of you to reevaluate the importance of what you consume and by which means it was produced. Thank you.